All right. Well, hi. Um, we're here with Alexia Michitti, and we're going to be talking about beliefs, goals, and how you've used your voice on a journey to inspire others. I wanted to just have you start off by introducing yourself, your background in athletics, and some of the projects you're working on now, and then we can get into a little bit more and ask some questions.
Sounds good. I'm Alexia Michitti. I just graduated a couple weeks ago from SUNY Oneonta. I was studying business there. I am now currently a public and motivational speaker, so I go around to schools and businesses and other events, podcasts, and I talk about the power of making an impact in the story of my life. Along with that, I'm also running a company called Embrace, as in Embrace Yourself. It's a first of its kind adaptive clothing company. I was born without my right hand. As you can see, I have my wrists, I have my fingers, and so I've always struggled with a sleeve being too long. So I figured, why not shorten the sleeve? So I was able to publish a patent for the clothing that I sell, which was super cool. And along with all of this, I also am an amputee soccer player, so I am a goalkeeper. And I just recently went to the World Cup where we placed second and got silver medals. And I was also named with the Golden Glove, which goes to the best goalkeeper of the tournament, which was awesome.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things I wanted to have you talk a little bit about are dreams and determination. You have mentioned before that as a kid, you dreamed about being on the U.S. team. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I think most kids, when they're little, dream of becoming professional athletes one day. When I was in second grade, I took one of my dad's old t shirts. It was after a Mia Hamm clinic that happened up in the Binghamton area. And I took one of my dad's old t shirts that shrunk a lot in the dryer, and I wrote Team USA right here with a Sharpie and a little Nike check mark. And I'd walk around pretending that I was on the national team and hoping one day that I'd be on Team USA. And, as I had gotten older with soccer, I realized that dream probably wouldn't happen. But I'm lucky enough in college, I was introduced to amputee soccer. And I realized that my dreams of playing for the US may be able to actually end up coming true. And in September of 2023, I was in Poland where I debuted for the United States and was able to play as a goalkeeper in the first ever women's amputee soccer match of the world. It was Team USA against Poland. And then in this past year, we played at the World Cup in Colombia, where I was able to represent the US yet again, which was awesome. So, dream come true for me.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, growing up when you were younger, when you were little, this was a dream that you totally believed in, and then at some point, you said it became, or like you realized, well, probably not going to happen. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean by that? And then it did become a reality, but there was some point in there where, for you, you had to probably some disappointment and just mention why and
Yeah, so when I was in high school, you start kind of getting a reality check of how life's going to go, whether it's for college or whatever you're doing after. And um, I realized that I was going to end up going to a Division 3 college to play soccer, which is okay. But I thought that would be it, and then I'd be done with soccer, and that's that. I was facing a lot. I started getting a lot of burnout my senior year of high school playing soccer, but I figured it would go away when I got to college and it was time to play at Ithaca College. But it didn't. It got worse. In the meantime, I was introduced to amputee soccer, and it kind of helped redirect me and find a new love for the game. And so at the end of my first year of college, I ended up quitting the NCAA team, and I was just playing amputee soccer full time. And I've been playing for the last 3 years, but leading up to the World Cup, I would say that it was an easy walk, but it wasn't. I had to learn not only just a new position, I was shifting from playing with the national team, which was co ed, to now with the women's team, which is a different pace, different skills, and not in a bad way. It's just how the game is. So I was adapting to that. But when it came time for camp in September, it was the last gathering before we'd go to the World Cup. I was facing terrible burnout, and I was done. I was in my worst mental state I had ever been in for from soccer, I guess you could say. And I was ready to quit the team that week. I was like, I'm not going to the World Cup. This is it. But I realized, this was my dream. I was weeks away from my dream happening. And what am I going to give up right now? Like, you're so close to living that. And I almost did quit. And I was thinking about my younger self wearing that fake little jersey I made, and you're going to give up on her right now. And then to my teammates, I couldn't give up. I didn't want to give up for them either, and other young girls who may look like me. So it's been a long process and journey, but the adaptive sports community wasn't something that I was introduced to until my first year of college, which was like 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, but
Yeah, and that's amazing, to think about that. When you mentioned that community, so your part of your mission is to make sure that other young people see and know that there are opportunities out there.
yeah,
Talk a little bit more about that.
yeah. So when I was younger, I want to say it was like maybe 4 or 5. I met this little girl locally. We were like walking at a local park, and she had one arm, and I didn't see her for years later. And at that point, that was the only kid at my age that I had met with one hand or missing part of their arm. And then as I got older, when I was in 10th grade in high school, my mom saw on the internet an organization called Lucky Fin Project, and they have an event every year out in Michigan. And all these people with upper limb differences, they join together and they basically just have this huge picnic for the weekend. Um, and so the summer after my 10th grade year, she said, let's go out there. And so I said, okay, like, sounds good. So we got there, and we're walking in, and my mom was crying really bad. And I said, Mom, pull it together. You're embarrassing me. There's all these kids, all these people around. I had to check us into the hotel, and she was crying because she was so happy, but overwhelmed too, because we both had never been exposed to this many people in my a community that looked like me. And same thing with my dad and my sister. We haven't met too many people that looked like me. And so I went to that. I didn't go again until about 2 years ago. The year before I launched my business, I went back to Lucky Fin Project, and then I launched my business there last summer. But my first year of college, I was introduced to amputee soccer. I was interviewing a man. His name's Eli Wolf. Um, my professor at Ithaca had told me that I had to interview him for the project we were doing. Everyone had a choice, but I did not. I was the only person who was told who I had to interview. And Eli ended up becoming a mentor of mine, and he introduced me to amputee soccer, cerebral palsy soccer. We just were working on a bunch of different events together. He unfortunately has passed away since 2 years ago, but I have been able, because of him, I've been able to really get connected to this community and develop into a athlete in this adaptive world that I didn't know about until I was about 16 to 18 years old. So it's been awesome because I never would have thought that this was even an option of things to do. So, yeah.
Wow. Your story is one that it's very familiar when often we hear of individuals who have a disability. They'll say, I didn't know there was anyone else out there. But yet, I don't have the exact number now on the top of my head, but there's a huge, tremendous number of people with disabilities. And the idea that they're there and we don't necessarily know that they're there. It's not that they're not seen, that they don't exist, but somehow we're not focused on them.
Yeah.
Um, so what are your thoughts about that? How do we change that, and maybe some of the leadership and advocacy you're doing to try to make that change happen?
I think for starters, like, and this may not directly be correlated with all of this, but in my personal opinion, I guess it is. Like, if you see an athlete who I guess is part of the adaptive community, don't underestimate their capabilities. If they want to join in on a sport you may be playing at school or whatever, you don't know what they're capable of. You could be in a wheelchair and run in compete in a race. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can be integrated into the community outside of the disability world. But as far as supporting adaptive sports in general. Paralympics, great example. Watching that, seeing that, it's okay to have questions. It's okay to Google these things too, because sometimes the answers are right. But exposing yourself to different types of disability and adaptive communities can really help grow it. I started playing amputee soccer, but that first year I was helping coach CP soccer. I don't have cerebral palsy, but I learned a lot from what those athletes needed and their stories. And even though we didn't have the same disability, I could still connect with them in a lot of ways. Um, there's a bunch of different types of events too that go on where you could volunteer to help and be part of that community, because it isn't just supporting it, it's being involved and just learning and being educated about it too. I think that's super important as well. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I know that for me, my involvement started just by, asking someone, inviting them to participate,
yep,
and not necessarily knowing what I might have to do to make that possible, or no, but working with them,
yep.
right?
A lot of things I've noticed in this community is just all about connection. Like even meeting you, I we met through someone else part of the uh, disability community to an extent. So you never know who you're going to meet, but the connections, you don't know where it could lead you to, which is awesome part of all of this too. So
Right, right. Maybe another part of the things that do need to change is that, though, the world is built based off of ability, which is fine. That is what is it, you might expect, but at the same time, there's obstacles that don't need to be in place, that
yeah,
when they're removed, make it things better for everyone,
yep,
and we need to be thinking about that and designing for that, in fact,
yep.
which kind of goes a little bit into like what some of your project is, and your company and business.
Yeah, so embrace. So my logo can confuse people. It's not EM13 race, it's embraces and embrace yourself. So I have no fashion experience. This whole idea has been developed off of personal need and what I've seen from others in this limb different community. So um, most clothes are designed for people that have two arms and two legs, but at the end of the day, those clothes still aren't fitting every single person in this world. So I figured, why not start an adaptive clothing business? So my company sells shirts cut at the shoulder, elbow, and wrist, and for the lower body at the hip, knee, and the shin. We go to a bunch of different events throughout the year to be a vendor or to table and advertise our business. We have a website, it's embrace.com. The B is a 13 if you search it. If that doesn't come up, you can search Embrace Adaptive Clothing too. And we are selling adaptive clothing, and we're meeting a need that hasn't been fulfilled yet. So a lot of adaptive clothing today, it's designed replacing buttons with zippers or easier access, putting pants on and off, or magnets, those type of things, replacing those with magnets as well. So we are shifting and adding a new layer of, I guess, adaptive clothing that hasn't been put out yet, which is awesome. And hopefully we can just keep growing from here. So
Is any of your, so it's all web based right now? Are you trying to reach out to other, like other businesses? What do you dream of creating ultimately?
My personal dream would, for my business, I guess, and for myself, will be to design and or help design the walkout clothes for the Paralympians. I think that would be awesome if their clothes were actually adjusted properly. Using my patent, I guess, would be an ideal situation. So they don't have to cut their sleeve or tie it or bunch it up. It's just fit properly. That's my ultimate dream. But I guess realistically, if that didn't happen, just helping people and making them feel more confident in the clothes that they're wearing. At the end of the day, like I know the struggle, but I want to help people, and I'm a very creative person. So these are two ways I know throughout my life, even since I was younger, that I wanted to be able to make an impact in this world. And I think with my brand, I'm able to start doing that, uh, which is awesome to see having my dreams as a child start coming to life. So
Right. Some of the things you said too about being creative, like, and also mentioning you hadn't had um, background in fashion industry before you took on this project. Talk a little bit more about that message you have about being, ideas and the power of ideas.
So when I go to schools a lot, the second part of my show is mainly focused about the power of an idea. And so when I was younger, I had notebooks and notebooks and notebooks full of ideas. I had a whole blueprint for a Harry Potter themed hotel, and this whole thing. I'd always have these ideas, and I'd up with a new thing, and I'd walk downstairs and I'd tell it to my parents, and they'd be like, that idea was okay. And then I'd go back upstairs, and then I'd think of something else, and then I'd come back downstairs and I'd present a new idea to them, and they'd be like, that's okay. And then I'd go back upstairs. And, at the end of my first year of college, I was hitting a wall while I was at Ithaca College. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I'm the type of person that plans my life like 5 to 7 years in advance. So the fact that I didn't know if I was returning to the school in the fall was really stressing me out. And one day I was just sitting in my dorm and I was literally on TikTok, not looking at anything related to the idea. And I got up from my bed and I grabbed a bunch of paper off of my notebooks. I like ripped it out and I just kind of was like throwing up ideas onto these pages and I was taping them up to the wall. And I didn't realize like 3 hours had passed. My teammates were knocking on my door because they didn't know if I was all right, but I was like, I'm in the middle of this. I'm coming up with something. And I finished every idea that I had left. And then I took all the papers and I put it in a drawer and I forgot about it. And I came home from school that year and I met with my business teacher from high school. And she said, what's your plan? I'm like, I don't have a plan. Like, I don't know what I want to do anymore. And initially, when I went to college, my goal was to become a public speaker, ironically. So I ended up doing that. But she said, Alexia, you're a very creative person. Go, I know you have a notebook or an idea somewhere. Go find it and come back to me when you're ready. And I said, all right. So I said, I do have an idea. So I pulled out the notebook with all of these pages of this idea of cutting the clothes off. And I went downstairs and I told my parents about this idea. And they said, oh, this is a good idea. And I was like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. I was like, all right. And I'm like, this is it. Like, this is my idea. I'm going to cut clothes, arms off and pants legs off of these clothes and I'm going to sell them. And I had come up with this whole idea. I realized that I was inventing the clothing that I was selling. My grandma is a very great sewer, so she's been helping me this whole time, and I've been learning the whole process along the way. But it didn't start if I didn't write the idea down in a notebook. And so I go to these schools and I freestyle, I do tricks with a soccer ball. So I always bring two students up, and whoever does, I give them a notebook. And I tell these kids, you can make an impact just by writing something down. You don't know when you're going to have to come back to it, which I think is a super important thing, even with Legos. Like my sister and I played Legos all the time when we were younger, and my parents would always joke, you two better invent something with how many Legos we've got. And I ended up inventing something, which is super cool. But I don't think it matters how much experience you have in something. If you really care about it and you work towards it, it's possible, and even being part of the um, adaptive sporting community or disabled community. You don't have to have a difference to be part of the community. You could still be part of it regardless. So advocating for yourself, get putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. I still question if this is the right thing to do, but I'm doing it, and it's what it is. But you have to believe in yourself in order to make things happen that you have strong feelings about. So,
Yeah, yeah, I think a big piece of it is being curious too,
yeah,
and you I love what you said, is like, you don't have to be the expert, you need to want to make a difference and take a step forward in that and find a community to be part of, um, and take that step. Sometimes for some people, it's easier to do it because they have had experiences that gave them confidence. Um, and then maybe giving back and trying to inviting someone else in is another way of doing it too. So I really commend you on what you're doing, and that's a great message.
thank you.
You also have talked about, you know, that believing in yourself and making an impact. Um, but more than that, you challenge people to to really um, do something and come up with something to help others. So
Yeah.
can you just talk a little bit more about like what that challenge is, how you challenge people?
Yeah, so at the end of my shows, I challenge all the students to think of 3 ways they can make an impact. One for themselves, so that could be something small or big, depending on what your level is. You could, I tell like younger kids, you could read 15 more minutes to better yourself, uh, putting a little bit more time, waking up a little bit earlier so you're on time for school. Um, make an investment in yourself because if you start getting that routine, then you're getting better for yourself personally. The second thing I challenge them is how they can make an impact in their classroom or in their school. So, behavior, that's a big one I've been talking about lately. How can you behave better for the whole class to move forward in lessons in the school day? Maybe helping your teacher out a little more. Maybe for a student sitting next to you, you might be better at something. You can lend them a helping hand to better them at that. And then the third thing I ask is how they can make an impact in their community or maybe in the world someday. So they have to think of how they want to do that for their own reasons, but it applies the same thing for college too, especially for students, that are taking this course. They clearly already have some type of interest, you get to pick your credits in college. So having an interest in this class, if you want to make an impact in this world, there's a bunch of different organizations locally. Springbrook is right around there. Volunteering would be a great way to find a way you can make an impact in your community. There's Special Olympics, a bunch of different things. If there's a specific sport, maybe you used to play basketball when you were younger and you want to get involved with adaptive basketball, there's wheelchair basketball. There's a bunch of different types of ways you can get involved and give your time back to other people to make a difference, because I think it's super important that everyone plays their part to better not just themselves, but the people around them and eventually others in the world. So,
Yeah,
that,
yeah, I think that's great. And I think, a big piece of it is not to be afraid of disability,
yeah,
or nervous around someone because they're different.
yep,
Um, and and maybe just like you would go and ask anybody to, like, you might look to people to say, well, you look like you're an athlete, or you could be part of this. And that's a big piece, is to
yeah,
see potential in people, right?
yeah, yep. I totally agree. So that little girl that I mentioned that I met when I was like 4 or 5 years old, she lives around here, and I saw her when I was in high school. She was playing on a soccer field, a couple fields over from me while I was at travel soccer practice, and I realized that she had one arm, and I ran up to her and I was like, "Hey, we have the same arm! Isn't that super cool?" And she was like quite younger than me, but old enough to talk to me and comprehend what I was saying, and she's like, yeah, and she was old enough to have Instagram, so we exchanged Instagrams, and I would go back and forth with her. And when I came home from Poland, competing there with the amputee women's team, her school, this little girl's school, invited me to go talk to their soccer team. And she came up to me after I was done talking and said, "Hey, you know, she already kind of knew me at that point, and she said, I'm interested in playing now because I had been asking her and over again. She said, kept saying no, and she said, I'm interested in trying this out. I said, perfect. There's a youth camp coming up. I will make an effort. I will go out there to Massachusetts to be there for you when you go. And her name is Addie, and she just went to the World Cup with me as one of the other goalkeepers. We're very good friends now. She's graduating high school this year. And it was awesome because if I didn't keep nagging her, I don't think she would have done it, you know, but, and maybe she would have. I'll have to ask her to confirm, but it's crazy how big of a difference just like keep being persistent about something, you know.
Mhm.
uh Now she's one of my teammates. She was at the World Cup, and you know, after the World Cup game, the final, I was crying. I was sad we lost. I saw my parents, they were calming me down. I was crying. I was sad. But I remember looking over after I pulled myself together and Addie was standing there, and I started crying again because I'm like, you know, personally, like, I did it. I met one of my goals. I'm playing with a kid that I wanted to be an example for, and she's an adult now and she's here with me, you know. So just reaching out to people. Like, there was another teammate of mine. I met her at Lucky Fin Project. I ran her down. She was leaving, and she had one leg, and I ran up to her and I was like, "Hey, you should play amputee soccer." And she was also in the World Cup too. So, you know, starting a conversation could really make a huge difference to people too, which I think is super important. And it may not
Yeah.
look the prettiest all the time. I'm known on my team for running people down to join, but you know, whatever works. So, yeah.
That is a great message. And I personally have a similar story in that, I mean, I'm a two-time Olympian, but I did not play sports in high school. And it was in college that someone came up to me and tried to introduce me to rowing. And I told them no, and I walked away. And then they came after me again and again and again. And this is exactly the type of thing is like we need to be thinking about doing that to all people and recognizing that there's potential
Yeah.
in everyone out there, and don't be afraid. Don't be
Yep.
afraid to do that and to be that encouraging force, and eventually someone will come around. So
And
that,
I'd agree with that too, because like when I started playing amputee soccer, I was like, what am I gonna get from this? Like, I don't really know. Like, this is something different. I guess I'll try it, whatever, you know. But you know, it didn't take. It took for me until after the game in Poland to realize, oh, this is something. This isn't just a game, you know. And then example with Addie being there, like, you know, this is bigger than the sport, and I talk about that too. Like, yeah, sure, we lost in the World Cup final. We lost 1-0 in Poland, but we got silver medals. You know, in the first ever women's amputee soccer World Cup, we were able to develop this community as well. Like, we still talk to international players. My teammates do. I know they do, you know. So it's like it's bigger than the sport, whatever sport it is. It's creating that community that you might not have ever been exposed to. I've never played adaptive sports until college, and I played soccer, I played basketball, I played softball briefly, like I played lacrosse briefly, like I've done all these sports, but I've done them with people without disabilities, and that's just how it was for me. But you know, once you have that door open for you, the possibilities are really endless for what you want from it. So,
yeah. So one last thing then, because you've mentioned that you've played with people who don't have a disability, and that was great. And then, you were given opportunities there, but
mhm.
to find a group of people who do have disability to also create more opportunity for them and teams is important.
Yeah,
Uh, why is it so important?
for for people without disabilities to be part of this community, or
To well, for no, I was thinking is why it's so important also to have opportunities to not just to be included with the non-disabled community, but that promoting teams for people with disabilities.
I think it's just like really just bringing the awareness to the sports. You know, when we were down in Columbia, there was over 20,000 people just watching our games and cheering for the games. You know, and feeling that support and knowing that your hard work isn't just being passed by. You know, we appreciate that. We're all athletes at the end of the day. We're still competing. We're still representing the country. You know, and um, it's not like a light fight out there. You know, I had scratches on my face from getting kicked. My teammates were all bruised and banged up. You know, we're competing out there, and I think it's important for all people to support disability sports and adaptive sports into their lives and make it part of it, because you never know what kind of situation will also bring you to that. You know, stuff happens, accidents happens, people may end up becoming part of the community. And I think just having that awareness and sharing it towards others, I think it's super important for other people. But I think also, if people do want to get connected to the community and you don't have a disability, I think it's important to consider the fact that, like, put yourself in the shoes of someone else. You know, if you think it's hard to try out forearm crutches and play amputee soccer, well, think of it as these athletes don't have any other option. You know, when I'm playing goal, my arms aren't out like this. My right arm has to be taped to my body, you know, and making those adaptations for yourself to really think of what the other side is and putting yourself in that other position. I think that's super important too when it comes to the sports too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Is there anything else that we have that we didn't cover, or anything else that you want to share?
If anyone wants to check out my website, it's like I mentioned before, embrace.com. It's EM13 race, or you can look up Embrace Adaptive Clothing, and there's more information. You can visually see, I guess, the clothes I sell and notebooks and stuff like that too. So, yeah, but I encourage everyone to try it out. There's adaptive sports days that are happening all the time. So if anyone is interested, tell them please to reach out to you, and I can send that information over to you at any point. So
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much.
thank you.
Well, have a great evening, and I will make sure that I get that your website and contact information included as
Sounds
well.
good.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to turn off the recording right now.